Good afternoon, viewers. You are watching us live at Caribbean News Network. As you all know, today Gambia goes to polls to elect their parliamentary representatives across the country. Based on this, we have set up a panel to analyze the process, also to give you a live update as far as today's event is concerned. With me today is one of the students from the political department from the University of the Gambia, who will, take us through a whole lot of important nutrients as far as this activity is concerned. So, sir, you're welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cham. I must start by saying I'm honored to be here. I am honored to be here, and I also want to say greetings to all prospective, beautiful listeners out there. My name is Ali Sise. I'm a university student, majoring in political science, and I'm very, very glad to be here today to interrogate the topic that preoccupied us, which is about the parliamentary election, which we are observing today.
Parliamentary elections is one of the electoral cycles, as far as Gambia is concerned. And you being a political science student, could you please give us some importance as far as today's event is concerned?
Yes, parliamentary election is very, very important in the life of a state, because you observe that this parliamentarian constitute the second organ of government, because remember we have three organs of government. One is the executive, second is the legislature, and third is the judiciary. So this parliamentarian who will be elected today will serve or will constitute that house where they will be making laws that will govern the state. So I think they are very, very important, and parliamentary election itself is very, very important.
You can't mention parliamentary or parliamentarians without looking at their oversight functions. Their oversight functions cannot be overemphasized as far as the nation building is concerned. So you being a political science student, we want you to tell us what you think, or give us some of the oversight functions of the members of the parliament.
Yes, let's first look at what oversight function really mean in this context, the oversight function of the National Assembly members. Now, oversight function, like these are powers given to the National Assembly members by Constitution to critically look into executive function or administrative function, both the executive, the judiciary, and other organs, or even administration in the country. Now, this power give them the opportunity to scrutinize, to examine, and overview the functions, whether the executive is doing well, whether it's not doing well. If there is any lapses, they address it, because the Constitution gives them that power. So one of the oversight function is to critically check the president, whether he is doing his duty or not, and also not only the president, but also the ministries, right? All ministers need to execute their duty as expected, and the parliamentarian have the authority to hold them account whenever they are not doing their work as expected.
When you talk about to hold the president and the ministers accountable, that is part of the oversight functions of the members of the parliament. The citizenry are currently outrageous, over some of the what they call incompetency of some of the ministers and the employees of the government, central government. Do you think the National Assembly, is actually implementing the responsibility that they are indeed entrusted with as far as these functions are concerned?
Yes, I will say they are doing, but not enough. Not enough very well, because if you look at the ministers we currently have, or we had in Barrow's administration during the past 5 years, you realize that we have competent one among them, but also there are among them, incompetent, because perfection is out of it. You understand? And I also want to commend the National Assembly members for doing or exercising that oversight function of them by critically looking into the appointment of the office of the ombudsman. They really declined that, and that was something commendable, and I want to commend them for that. But then when you talk about ministries and ministers, whether they have done well in trying to make sure ministers that can handle positions are appointed, well, that is disputable, because you will realize that some ministers in Barrow's administration during the past 5 years, they were incompetent. I don't want to name names. However, we look forward to see these people that are elected or that are going to be elected, that they will do their function to make sure that Barrow's administration constitute good ministers who will be able to assist him in administering the affairs of the country.
One of the oversight functions will be, if you look at the Ghanaian parliaments and also other parliaments within the sub-region, usually the parliament is characterized with intense debate as to who, is going to man ministerial positions and also key functions in the government. And in your own opinion, do you think that has ever taken place within the setup of our National Assembly to vet, to scrutinize the competence of the government appointees?
Yes, I think as far as my opinion is concerned, I can remember only one event. That was the appointment of the office of the ombudsman. And then probably there may be other instances or cases where they really debate on certain appointment done by the president, probably because of the mind is sometimes you can sideline certain things. But one thing I can remember for sure is the appointment of the office of the ombudsman. They really debated on that matter, and they pull down or they pin down the decision of the president for appointing somebody whom they think that person was not fit enough to mount that position, and that is something very, very great.
So in effective parliament, what impact would that have on a nation?
Yes, that is very, very important, because you realize that not all electorate, not everybody in the country have the opportunity to sometimes speak and say this person is incompetent or whatever. So these people have the power. They are given that power, and they are also being empowered by their electorates, and so that they can do this thing on their behalf. So you will realize that they look into certain things that the government does right now. And for instance, when the government want to do certain things which they think is not right, they try to make sure that will not happen, right? And then how the way they do it is by making sure that they critically examine, right, how that is being done. For instance, if the president want to appoint a minister whom they think this minister do not fit to be in that particular position, they have the power constitutionally to say this will not happen here. And if that happens, that will not happen, because the president cannot overpower them in that case.
So in this case, one would assume that, in fact, the legislature is the most powerful organs of government.
Undoubtedly, sir. Undoubtedly, because you will realize that the legislature have this power to even remove the president out of office. The legislature have the power to remove the president out of office through the vote of no confidence when they realize that the president is not good enough to serve the country, or the president have done certain ill practices, certain actions that are not in line with the constitution. They have the power to remove the president out of office, that is to oust him out of office. So this means that they are even powerful than the executive, who is the
but in what proposition of representation can at least vote the president out of the office, when we have in most cases you have the majority from the majority in parliament? And how is this possible when the incumbent forms majority in parliament?
It is very, very possible, because remember, the parliamentarians are not there to serve the incumbent. They are there to serve the Gambian people, and the manner in which they should do their work should be in line with the constitution. So when the president deviates the constitution, or when they realize that the president is not fit to serve the country, they have the power, right? That nobody can dispute them, or nobody can attack them for doing so, because the president, if the president is not fit to serve, they should oust him out of office. They have that power.
Viewers, like we've said, you're watching us on Caravan News Network. I am accompanied here by a very competent, university student, Mr. Cisse, who is sharing his expertise in the area of political science. And we, as you all know, today is a very important day in the history of this country. We are trying to vote in the 6th Parliament. So actually governments are out there to cast their vote for the person that they think is competent to represent them in the Parliament for the next 5 years. Mr. Cisse, my reporters are across everywhere, and one significant thing that they are reported from the fields is we have a very low voter turnout as far as today's event is concerned. Well, what do you think might be the cause?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, because if you look into history, I one time listened to Hasum Cisse. He's a historian. He one time said, and I quote, that the voter turnout for the parliamentary election is always low because people have this belief that parliamentary election is not very important. However, that's a wrong belief. But then the fact of the matter is that historically, parliamentary turnout, voter turnout have been very, very poor, historically. So I'm not surprised about that. However, people need to be enlightened about the importance of parliamentary election, because parliamentary election is very, very key in a national development, because these are the people who push the agenda of the national development. These are the people who debate about the agenda of the national development. These are the people who approve the agenda of the national development. So they are very, very important, and people need to know the importance of these people. However, I'm also saying that the NCCE, which is the National Council for Civic Education, have to add up their speed in making sure that the masses are aware about the importance of parliamentary election. This way, we can have a higher number or a higher voter turnout when it comes to the parliamentary election. CEC will also query that they have done their best to ensure that community outreach are observed in trying to sensitize people to vote. But in the end, people decided not to go and cast their vote. That shows how one would think how insignificant voting in the national for the parliamentary election is. But like we mentioned, parliamentary election, parliament is important, and we cannot go. A nation cannot go without the parliament, because these are the people that are entrusted with the responsibility to check the performance of the assembly, of the president and his cabinet. These are the people that discuss on the budget to ensure that the president will not use his veto powers to do what he feels is necessary. So we are looking at 246 parliamentary candidates, and we have 53 constituencies, and we have 62,157 electorates. And then, like you just mentioned, that the voter turnout. I'm trying to establish this, whether each parliamentarian here can go home with almost about 30,000 votes. Well, that sounds very impossible with me, looking at like the delimitation of the constituencies. Because you will realize that some constituencies, the turnout obviously will be very low, and that will make it impossible for a parliamentarian to come out with that number. But then probably when you add the voters, both candidates, it can reach to that level. Now, and I think that way also, not only one constituency, but also just a number of constituencies, when you add, we will have that number probably. Because already we observe that the turnout is very, very low. Right, the turnout is very, very low, and this is because people feel reluctant to go and vote, and some of them have the belief that the IEC is not doing its job, and also they lack trust. They lack trust on the government, and that is what is compelling them not to go out and vote.
We are expected to see 53, candidates that will be directly elected by the electorate themselves, and the government and the president also has the powers to appoint or nominate 5 nominated candidates. Altogether will give us 58. And then when we look at this, we should put the last parliament into review. And one key expectations that was placed on them is to vote in the draft constitution. And we've seen this constitution was sent to the dustbin.
Yeah, it was really.
Could you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, I think this was as a result of improper representation, right? The parliamentarians who were there in the past 5 years, in my own opinion, did fail us, because if you look at the draft constitution, right, it cost a huge amount of money for the people that comes or that brought forward this draft constitution are able to bring it forward to the National Assembly. It costs a lot, and then what it entails, the information, the laws that were in that draft constitution also were very meaningful. You understand? Because one of the laws which I want to recommend was the quorum, the women quorum, that empowers women to participate and take part in politics, which gives them the authority to constitute 50% of the National Assembly. So you will realize that this thing was thrown, and this denied the women in participating effectively into politics. And also the age limit of the president, which was also enshrined in that draft constitution, was also very, very key. Although somebody might dispute it and say it is undemocratic, you look at other countries outside the world, they are not doing that because. But then I think in a country such as the Gambia, that is very, very important, because you will realize that throughout history, our people that we entrust to take charge of the affairs of our country, basically have not been doing.
You mentioned something that is key. That is the women participation in politics. Yesterday, the Gambia Participates, released their report on the election observations, and one thing that is highlighted in the report is, they feel that the political parties, have not done enough to encourage women participation in politics. If you look at the gender representation of their executive structures, you will find out their male counterpart has overweight them in terms of entrusting them with responsibilities. What do you think could be done enough to at least redress that situation? Yes,
recently there is a bill that is in the parliament, which is already also thrust out in the parliament and thrown to the dustbin. And this bill empowered was giving them, or will have give opportunities for women in the party structures, in different party structures of the country, like in different political parties that we have in the country, so that they can constitute a greater number and also balance, right, the responsibilities. Because you realize that that bill states, or clearly states, that every political party should have at least a percentage, a very good percentage of women in the executive. So this, I think the parliamentarians deny it, and they don't vote for this. Although they are preaching women's empowerment, but they are not practicing it.
Don't you think the reason why that bill was thrust out, it lacks nutrients, that convince the National Assembly that this is what is going to be implemented? Because if there's no more justification as to what is required for this bill to be passed, it could be, it could be trust. And then, what do you think, people that draft bills need to put into consideration before such is forwarded to the members of the parliament to debate over it?
Yeah, I will not have much time to deal into this, but then before a bill is even sent to the National Assembly, it has to undergo certain processes, and this processes is what enriches the bill to become a very standard one, so much that if it is sent, or if it go to the parliament, parliamentarian will not have the power to throw it out. So you realize that those that are responsible for drafting a bill, they should consider the substance of the bill. They should make sure all necessary information are in the bill, so that people or the parliamentarians will vote for that particular bill. Now, I will somehow blame the drafters for that particular bill as to the reason why it was not accepted by the parliamentarian. But you realize that even though the substance is not there, but then I think the parliamentarian can substantiate this bill. They can substantiate this bill. And also you look at the vice president, who is a female, can push the agenda to make sure this bill passed in the parliament. But then the vice even have a rift with the main woman or with the woman who took this bill to the parliament, simply because the woman believed that the vice president do not do much in trying to make sure that this bill passed.
In your view, do you think that's a big blow in the life of women of this country?
Yeah, it's really a big blow, because that will have given them the opportunity to take part actively and effectively in politics, because that percentage will have been there for them. And you understand that it will be a matter of must for women to constitute that percentage, because you will see that if that happens, or if that was to happen, political parties will elect or will choose women as their representative. But then you realize that recently we have only few women, because if you go to any polling station, you will have only 1 or 2 women out of the candidates that are contesting, to make sure people entrust them their votes so they can represent them in the parliament.
Don't you think our cultural practices also, sometimes do influence some of these key decisions of even the elite? That is the masculine superiority of men. One would say, okay, women are not meant to represent, take part in nation building. They are meant to take care of our homes.
Well, that's a misconception, actually. I'm not a gender activist, but I want to say that is a misconception. Well, women can do it just like the way men can do it. Women can do it just like the way men can do it. And also, you realize that women sometimes are very instrumental in the development of a nation. Because let's say an example is like Yakumba Jaite. Yakumba Jaite's presence in the National Assembly during the past 5 years was very instrumental. And Yakumba Jaite proved to the whole world, particularly the Gambia, that women can do it. And up to date, she's ready to prove it, because she's contesting under Serekunda. And I'm very sure if she is opportune to win, she will do her best once again.
We quickly look at the National Assembly composition for the last parliament, which says below is a graphic representation of the National Assembly for the 2017 election with 31 UDP NAMs, you have 5 APRC NAMs, you have 5 NRP NAMs, you have 5 GDC NAMs, 4 PDOIS NAMs, 2 PPP NAMs, 1 independent NAMs, and 5 nominated NAMs. When you looked at the onset of the parliament, you have the National United Democratic Party almost dominate the parliament.
Very well.
But in the end, we have seen factions and defections to other political parties. Do you maintain, or do you have the belief that United Democratic Party may dominate, or
once again,
it is between the United Democratic Party and the National People's Party?
Well,
what kind of composition in terms of party representation you may likely see in the 6th parliament?
I want to believe the incumbent is very powerful right now, and I also want to believe that he may dominate, because there are certain areas which he is controlling. But in the Gambian people, myself, I will advise the Gambian people to vote for opposition to constitute the parliament, because these are the people who will be able to scrutinize the president without even an iota of doubt or an iota of any ill feeling against the president. You understand? And when this is done, this will ensure that the president does his duty as expected. So most likely, UDP is going to do well in this time, but not as it happens in the 6th parliamentary election.
Thank you so very much. And one thing that we've also seen the last parliament, conducted was they have debated to at least loan themselves with almost about $54 million, which was eventually, objected by the Gambia participants, and then the issue was taken to court, and the court ordered them not to loan themselves with that. Don't you think that alone has betrayed the trust of Gambians in their performance?
Yeah, not all National Assembly members also accepted that when it happens, and I want to believe those who accepted at the beginning basically were there to serve themselves and not their people. They were there to enrich themselves. They were there to make sure they self-aggrandize themselves and not to represent their people as they promised, because that in itself is undone. It's undone, because there is no basis, no genuine basis under which they wish to take loan for themselves. The basis was robust or bogus and ungenuine. So I think parliamentarians start to learn how to represent their people and not to represent themselves.
As governments are out to exercise their franchise, what would you advise them to look at in those that project themselves to be parliamentary candidates? Because I believe casting your votes for someone should not be based on family line.
Very well. Mm-hmm.
So it must be based on a competency that you have cited in that particular person. So what would you have looked at on someone before you cast your vote for that particular person?
Yes, myself, in my own opinion, what I will have looked at, or what I will look at in voting my parliamentary or representative to represent me in the National Assembly, one will be competency, right? Competency is something that many people sometimes even misunderstand. Competency have to do with the whole personality of an individual, that is his integrity, honesty, respect, and also knowledge. This is what symbolizes the competency of an individual. When an individual have all these things, the person is said to be competent. And when somebody is competent, basically the person is fit enough to take charge of that particular responsibility entrusted to him or her. Now, one thing I will have looked at is competency. And another thing that I will have also looked at is voting somebody who is a staunch and active youth in that particular constituency, somebody who have contributed meaningfully in the development of that constituency, even without or before he aspire to be a National Assembly member. You understand? Because part of the constitution which says that a National Assembly member should reside in his or in that constituency for a period of 1 year prior to contesting. This means that the National Assembly member need to know the environment under which he or she is trying to contest to serve them, because that way you'll be able to represent them well. But then it is so unfortunate that some of them don't preside or reside
within their constituencies. Okay,
of 1 year.
Some electorates will query that since they have voted in their representative, they've not spoken a single word, addressing or putting to the parliament their concerns, because we all know that the parliamentarians are elected for a purpose.
Yes, and as a mediator.
Exactly. If that purpose is not served, then actually those people will term that they will consider that a betrayal of trust. And then what kind of parliament could that behavior constitute when you have people that barely speaks a word in the parliament, and the people feel that these are our representatives that are there to address the issues of government people?
Well, it is very disheartening. It's very disheartening to have such a parliamentarian like that. I want to say myself, my constituency is a victim. We have a representative whom we hardly see speaking, and this is something that the people of my constituency stresses a lot. And then you realize that our parliamentarian, our representative, should serve as a mediator between us and the government. And one way of effectively serving as a mediator between us and the government is by engaging us, the electorates. They need to come to us time to time to ask our problems, discover our problems, and try to diagnose our problem with a prescribed solution to to our problems. But in this, in most cases, is not done, because you realize that parliamentarians, when they are elected, immediately they assume office, they have started doing their own business. You hardly even see them. Even to see them and talk to them is a problem. And this is something very, very undone, because people elect you to represent them. And one way in which you can effectively represent them is by engaging them, having some time, spending some time with them, knowing their problems, and so as to address those problems.
When we looked at the statistics of the candidates, we found out that you have young people are now taking part in active politics. And then, in doing that, we believe that young people will be effectively, represented in the parliament, and some of the key issues that affect young people in this country might be addressed, because the parliament is going to constitute almost, if not all, but half of the representations in the parliament will constitute young people. In your view, as a political science student, how significant is the participation of young people in national politics?
Yeah, young people, the participation of young people in national politics is very key, because young people also constitute a greater percentage of the population. And therefore, if they participate in national politics, it means the future is bright. The future is bright, because these are the people whom we call the leaders of tomorrow. Now, serving there is a stepping stone. Being there in the parliament is a stepping stone for them to acquaint themselves with the skills to serve their nation. Now, I want to believe that this parliamentary election, the turnout or the number of youths that contest or that are contesting is very telling. And this is also very promising. But the problem is whether these people will win or luckily win is something that I am wondering about. If you look at it, most of these youths that are coming as independent candidates, because the political parties don't recognize them to come under their political party. And you realize that this is as a result of certain things which I don't want to talk about, because if you look at political parties, how they are structured, young people like me, if I want to come under a political party and you are telling me to sponsor myself, it's going to be a problem. You are indirectly denying me from coming to serve or coming to contest under your political party. So this is a very key issue. But I'm optimistic, because you realize that young people are definitely throwing themselves into the ring of the political arena.
Large number of Gambians expect to see the draft constitution be taken back to the parliament for a debate again. What is your feeling about the whole process? Do you have the confidence in the incoming members of the parliament to say that
I am optimistic.
The draft constitution will once again, witness the breeze within the National Assembly?
Yes, I am very optimistic about that, because I did follow most of the National Assembly debates, and most of them, when they are posed this question, that whether you will accept the draft constitution if it was during your time, or if it is taken back to the parliament, most of them accept it. Most of them don't want to reject it anymore. And this means that if the draft constitution is taken back to the parliament, it is going to be a law. It's going to be the constitution of this country. And I am also glad that these people have the understanding that it does not worth the government to spend that huge amount of money for a draft constitution, but amendment of some part of the constitution and also retrieving some laws that are in the constitution is very, very easy, and parliamentarians themselves can do it. So most of them answered in this way, that they will accept the draft constitution if it is taken back to the parliament, and they will also critically look into it. That is by means of debating, and that is debating on the draft constitution to make sure certain things that are there and are not fit for purpose will be removed, and certain things that need adjustment will be adjusted.
Irrespective of all these outrageous words, that comes from the Gambian people, due to the disappointment that they received from the members of the parliament to trust the draft constitution. Yet, a great number of Gambians equally want to retain, the 1997 constitution, because they believe that that addresses the needs of the Gambian people, than the draft that is being developed.
Yes, I think the draft constitutes certain substances which the 1997 is not having, and I did mention that, like the women quorum and the age limit, and there are many other things that the draft constitutes which is not in the 1997. And if you look at it also, societies evolve, and this demands for the new emerge of laws that will fit for purpose, because you realize that the 1997 constitution was somehow dictatorial, because it was during the regime of President Jammeh, and this person, many people know who this person was, and there were a lot of things which he inserted in the constitution, imposing on the parliamentarians to approve it, and these things need to be critically looked at, and it need to be removed out of the 1997 constitution, and where necessary certain things need to be added to make sure that the constitution fit for purpose and also addresses the current situation of the country.
In the parliament, should the debate be based on partisan line? Because this seems to influence activities in the parliament most of the time. You realize that certain issues should have been addressed, but because it faces some setback in the parliament as a result of partisan interest. Okay, that the government is unable to facilitate one or two because of that, and then you realize that certain issues should also not. It is not necessary for it to be implemented because it comes up because the incumbent has the majority in parliament. What is your view on this? Do you think everything in the parliament has to go on partisan line or otherwise?
Yes, parliament is not meant for partisan issues. I think every parliamentarian, once you've stepped your foot in that parliament, you remove the cap of your political party and wear the cap of the Gambian people, which is the people you are representing, and no more, or not the cap of your party. Now, every parliamentarian need to avoid associating yourself with your political party for the interest of your political party, but the interest of the people you are representing. Now, sometimes there can be clash for your political party to want something, and that does not serve the interest of your people. But as a parliamentarian, you should guard or safeguard your dignity, because you promise your people to serve them the best of your ability, without fear or favor. Then in that case, there shouldn't be any parliamentarian who should look into the favor of the political party he is representing, or the political party that elected him, or the political party in which he served, or he got the opportunity to be in the parliament.
So what advice would you have for various political parties who has definitely identify a candidate to stand in these parliamentary elections, in case if their candidate is not declared victor in today's process?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting, because some people cannot take defeat. Some people cannot take defeat, and that will result to some people challenging the outcome of the election. And there the IEC have a problem again. However, I think it is important that for people or representative, parliamentarian, to respect the verdict of the Gambian people, or the verdict of the people of their constituency, because whatever decision they made, it need to be respected, and it means whosoever win is the choice of the people, and there whether the person is fit enough to serve or whether he is not fit enough to serve is another question of its own. But I think that need to be respected, because
finally we scrutinize the body entrusted with the electoral process, that is the Independent Electoral Commission. Lately, they've been labeled all sort of words, that they are incompetent, they are not partial, and issues like that. As they are entrusted with another key responsibility to manage the affairs of today's electoral process. What advice would you say to them in order not to repeat what many call deliberate mistakes that have been identified, in the last electoral processes?
Yes, I think the IEC need to be very careful and need to also try in making sure that they prove the Gambian people wrong, because many people have this perception that they are not competent enough to hold the parliamentary election. Now, one way of proving the Gambian people wrong is by making sure that they do things as expected and they make sure everything is done in the proper way. I was very glad looking at the nomination process, because remember, election is a process both before and after. You understand? And the nomination of Sabali was rejected and the matter was taken to court, and Sabali failed this case. And this also proved the competency of the IEC. However, let's see what happens as we are in the process and after the election, when the results is declined, whether there will be no substance of favoritism or some elements that symbolizes that the IEC was not doing their work as expected. But I'm advising the IEC to be very mindful, take their time and do things as it is expected, because the constitution and the code of conduct define their duty very well, and if they apply it, if they enforce it, no way they are going to do it as expected.
Okay.
But lack of enforcing that or not enforcing that will really lead them to another problem.
All right, so thank you so very much. That was my guest, Mr. Cisse. We bring down the curtain to this discussion, and we promise to come back again as the results, chip in from the National Assembly building, all the way in Canifing. So thank you so very much. That was a very interesting discussion between myself and my guest, Mr. Cisse. So thank you so very much for following us. Thank you.
Thank you.